Steph Weaves Tales presents Paxwood, The Haunting of Paxwood House, a paranormal fantasy web serial written and narrated by Stephanie Gildart. Episode 19, Eavesdropping, Trespassing, Terrible Hobbies. The voice I most wanted to hear flowed through Mix Cardoso's door and into my ears. I paused at the threshold, out of sight. Was Char back to school today, or was I imagining it? The puzzle box project? That way she had of turning a statement into a question, the lightest raise of her tone at the last word. I knew her teacher conversation voice so well. I'd missed it. That makes sense, Mix Cardoso said. Anything else I can do while your arm is healing? Could he actually magically make it better at light speed? If magic was real, and all magic was possible, then how about healing magic? I pressed up against the wall instead of going through the door. Char needed time after all. She hadn't sent me a message. She hadn't called. No one told me she'd be back at school today. She clearly didn't want to see me. I'm not sure it's really something you can help with, she said. Try me. Mix Cardoso's tone was gentle. Well, it's about Kerry. Dagger to my chest. This wasn't a conversation I should eavesdrop on. It was never a good idea to listen when people were talking about you. I twisted away from the door and pounded the pavement in any direction but right there, right then. I didn't need to hear Char telling Mix Cardoso how she felt unsafe with me because over the course of 1 week, I'd gotten her in trouble with her parents for taking her out into the forest on a school night under false pretenses. Then, I'd gotten her arm broken as a final flourish to a terrible week. Would Mix Cardoso defend me or protect Char? Now that I was in on the magic, and Char wasn't, would distance be better anyway? Mix Cardoso would probably advise her to keep away from me for her own safety. She hadn't decided to participate in the world of magic. Her shield of skepticism stood. I sniffed, blinked, shook my head. Bathroom. I needed to hit the bathroom before I headed to first period. It took a couple of minutes to refresh and reset, but I still finished up before the 5-minute bell chimed. As I walked toward my first period class, I checked my phone, tentative. Of all the things I expected to see, a message from Sly's name was a pleasant surprise. I smiled as I flicked the message open, then read it twice, eyes widening. Sly. Trish is going to Paxwood House today. Right now. She and Hugh were talking about the jewelry box, and now she's off. Not 30 minutes before, I was asking Rowen if she thought it was wise to go to the Sylphium Resort on her own. In hindsight, there were so many other options for me. At the very least, I could have asked myself that same question before I started moving against the flow of students heading toward their classes and toward the bicycle rack. Or given a thought to the fact that if my first period teacher marked me absent, my mother would get an attendance robocall. But hey, if you've never cut class before, you don't think about flying under the radar. I wasn't a total goody two-shoes. I'd used a bathroom pass or two to stay out in the hall and avoid a class I didn't want to attend. Used my TA period in the library to roam a little further afield than necessary. Been late to class because I got caught up in pursuit of a story. Played sick and gotten one of my parents to call it in for an excused day off. This was my first time outright cutting. I had the best justifications, though. Someone had to check in on what Ann Holtz and Hugh were up to. Mix Cardoso had to teach. And Rowen was off meeting with city councilors or heading to the Northern Cascades Sylphium Resort, so both were busy. It was down to me to gather this vital information. It might shed light on the concept of a Paxwood treasure or reveal what Sylphium wanted with Paxwood House. This story was too important to neglect. I felt it in my bones, and it had nothing to do with avoiding Char. Paxwood High wasn't exactly close to Paxwood House. Paxwood House sat on a hill, overlooking the city, surrounded by residences and forest. By the time I reached there, pedaling hard against gravity, I was breathless. I wheeled my bicycle around the perimeter, away from the main gate, to the collapsed and crumbling section of the wall that I'd used so many times to cross into the grounds. I didn't second guess the miasma that enfolded me as I crossed the barrier this time. It was real. The house was haunted, and this was a tangible aspect of that haunting. The air was colder, heavier, darker. Light couldn't penetrate as easily. Was it a common aspect of many hauntings or particular to this house? Had the Paxwoods built the place to harness this kind of energy, or was the atmosphere a result of all the untimely deaths? Plenty of questions left to be answered, but none of them would help me figure out where Anholtz and Hugh were. I checked my phone, but Sly hadn't sent me any updates or more information. I had to go with my gut on this. Most overt entrance was through the front door. Unless they had magical reasons, they didn't need to slink in through the back or use a window. They'd have the keys from the sloppy realtor who didn't want to visit the haunted house. Cutting between trees and around low-growing clusters of ferns and brambles, I approached the front door. The door stood wide open and inviting. A black rental Mercedes sat empty in the driveway, just the car a vampire lawyer would drive. They were inside. I climbed the porch steps and headed inside too, pausing just on the other side of the threshold to listen. At first, nothing stood out, just empty house sounds, a slight creak here, a rattle there. For a moment, near the grand ballroom, I thought I'd caught the sounds of string music, but no, I shook that off. It didn't make sense. There, an echo of conversation came from the direction of the kitchen. I took the softest steps across the old hardwood foyer floor, then pressed myself against the wall instead of moving straight into the doorway that led down to the servants' quarters. The basement is the most likely hiding place, the vampire asserted. It could be hidden anywhere on the grounds. Let's do a wider survey for the symbol. Trust me, a space with no windows beneath the ground, easily accessible by the family but not meant for guests. This is where we should begin our search. Or do you have that all-too-human fear of basements yourself? Anholtz scoffed. I waited for their footsteps fading down the creaking basement stairs, then started down the hall after them. As I did, though, I shivered. That sound of strings playing behind me echoed in my ears again. I tossed a glance over my shoulder and saw the doors to the grand ballroom standing open. Had they been open before? A grip as real and firm as any living humans clamped around my arm and pulled, but there was no one standing next to me. The force threw me off balance. I stumbled, trying to keep my feet beneath me. To turn, another vice-like grip grabbed my other arm. A lady's voice cooed in my ear. "Come to the party, darling. You're ever so welcome." I did the only truly natural thing to do when unseen whispering forces were dragging you against your will. I screamed. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Paxwood, Book 1, The Haunting of Paxwood House, is written and narrated by Stephanie Gildart. That's me. Theme music composed by Human Nature. Visit paxwoodtales.com to read the story as it unfolds. Want to read over my shoulder while I write what's next? Catch me live on Twitch for laid-back virtual write-ins and crafting. If you like the story and you want more, like, review, comment, subscribe, and if you're feeling particularly entangled, buy me a skein of yarn on Coffee. Kerry's paranormal tip of the day. The best way to keep a basement or attic free of paranormal threats is regular use, cleaning, and maintenance. Double plus, you also keep the normal pests at bay.